Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Scott Luton and Corinne Bursa with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Corinne, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Scott. It's a great day to be in supply chain and a real privilege to be here with you and the Supply Chain Now team.
And hey, two shows in a week, and this is going to be
Yeah.
another home run show, undoubtedly. Folks, great show teed up here today. We're going to be shining a big old bright light. That's a technical term. Big old bright light on a growing challenge across global supply chain: cargo theft. Folks, have you heard? According to some estimates out there, cargo theft is up almost 50% here in 2024 over last year. But there's good news. We're going to be sharing critical data, insights, and actions that supply chain leaders got to be aware of so they can take them as they look to mitigate this big risk moving forward. Corinne, should be a timely show, huh?
Absolutely, Scott. I cannot believe that stat you shared, 50% increase in theft. Now, I heard in some of the research I did that 2023 last year had a 40% increase. So when you look at consecutive years, this is a real challenge. I'm really looking forward to hearing what our guest speaker has to say today.
Corinne, I am as well. And you know what? What compounding the data you shared there is it doesn't get enough attention and visibility. So we're here to help change that. We got a wonderful guest, so stay tuned. By the way, folks, big thanks. Jimmy's with us here. Bakil is back. Welcome, everybody. Let us know where you're tuned in from. And also, more importantly, let us know what your thoughts are as we unpack this show here today. Two last things before we get going. Share your comments throughout this live discussion. Use that commenting, the cheap seats as we call it. We'll share those throughout. And secondly, if you enjoy today's show, be sure to share it with a friend and your network. They'll be glad you did. All right, Corinne, ready to get to work?
I'm ready.
I want to welcome in our guest here today. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to educate, inform, and laugh a little bit as we reminisce on things across supply chain and baseball. So with all that said, let's welcome in Richie Daigle, Enterprise Account Executive with TIVE. Hey, Richie, how are you doing?
Hey, Scott, doing well today. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. Great to have you back. We've really enjoyed Corinne and me and you and Lauren and Amanda, Catherine, all the folks behind the scenes helping make today happen. Our prep conversations, including your baseball background. Now, there's a reason I mentioned down the front end. You, folks out there, we like starting with a fun warm-up question. And I know many folks out there know that I'm a big old baseball nerd. Corinne, you'll at least identify as a baseball nerd for the next hour, won't you?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we both love our Braves. I'm a big fan of the movie Moneyball. And come to find out, you played professional baseball, Richie, for the Padres organization. So you got to, and as we talked about in the prep show, Greg Maddux being one of my all-time favorite players, I think you rubbed elbows with Mad Dog Maddux at spring training one year. So tell us more about a favorite moment or two during your baseball journey, Richie.
Yeah, my very first day of spring training, first day ever, as green as can be. And I got my tray and I got in the breakfast line to go get food at 6:30 in the morning or so. And still not fully awake. And then it dawned on me, I'm standing behind Maddux and in front of Trevor Hoffman. And
Wow.
I mean, I've looked up to these guys for my whole career. So I looked back at Hoffman. I was like, I mean, how does this work? Am I in the wrong place? Like, are you supposed to be going ahead of me? Like, it's my first day. I don't know what's going on. He just kind of laughed at me and said, "You're right where you need to be." And I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. But yeah, I did get to spend some time with Maddux. And of course, was able to get him alone for a minute. And I was like, all right, how does pitching work? Like, what are you doing? Like, teach me. And, his dad was a blackjack dealer and he just thinks in terms of probabilities and numbers.
Interesting.
And he said, listen, Richie, pitching's really easy. I'm like, thanks, Greg Maddux. I appreciate you letting me know that pitching's so easy, But then he said, look, it comes down to having a plan, knowing how to implement your plan and executing your plan, and then he pointed out that all the hitters that, they're hitting 300, the best ones. So they're getting out 70% of the time. He's like, I'm the casino. They're the gamblers. So if I have a plan to make their odds worse, and then I know how to implement that plan, which is knowing what pitch to throw in what situation, and then I can execute. It's like math says I'm good, and then I just have to do
Mm.
those things. And I think that applies pretty heavily in the business world as well. If you can have a well thought out plan, if you know how to implement your plan, and if you can execute it, you're going to improve your odds for success. And I think Maddox showed that approach works.
Oh, Richie, and Corinne, I knew I was going to have to keep myself from talking
Yeah.
baseball stories with you for over the next hour. We'll have to have Greg Maddox back on the October 16th show with you, Richie. But really quick, Corinne. First off, Richie was part of a Hall of Fame sandwich between Trevor Hoffman and Greg Maddox, by the way. But I
Mm.
love the probabilities and that view on life and view on baseball, because there's lots of supply chain takeaways there as well. The playing the probabilities, right? And the blackjack. I had no idea that Greg Maddox's father was a blackjack dealer. No wonder he views things in the worlds of odds and statistics. Corinne, your thoughts there?
Oh, I thought that was a great story, Richie. That's fantastic. And I like the mathematical element of that, because a lot of supply chain is all about math and synchronizing supply, demand, and distribution. So looking forward to hearing a little more about what happens when our distribution gets disrupted.
Oh, that's a great segue, but I'm not going to let you do it just yet, Corinne, because I got one more thing. With Greg Maddox, there's a great moment. I think Greg Maddox was getting interviewed during the middle of the game, and Richie, to your point, he was telling his colleague sitting beside him what was going to happen with this one batter, because he was analyzing what the pitcher was
Yeah.
throwing. He already knew the batter's tendencies, and he said, "You're going to have a foul ball that hit this bench right here." And I'll be daggum fit. That's exactly what happened. So Corinne and Richie, predictive analytics. Greg, who would have thought Greg Maddox was
Wow.
a trailblazer there? All right, so now I want to really quick. Hey, Parva from India, welcome in. Danny Harmon from Cincinnati, Ohio, home of the Reds. Great to see you, Danny. Alex from Charlotte, North Carolina. Welcome in, everybody. Katricia and T Squared. Great to have you back as always. Holds down the fort for us on YouTube. Okay, now Corinne and Richie, we got a great show teed up. Let's start with some more context. You have to come back for the baseball hour, because we want to get
Mm.
into the cool things you and the Tive team are doing, Richie. Let's start with telling us a little bit more about your background professionally and a little bit about what Tive does.
Yeah, so I've been in the supply chain space for close to 5 years now. Prior to Tive, I was at Freight Waves, and prior to that, I was in a whole other industry working in adventure travel.
Mm.
So yeah, I've learned quite a bit over a short period of time, and really excited and grateful to be part of the Tive team, just because it's a great feeling to be working for a company that's making a real tangible difference, and we see that impact on a daily basis, and that just keeps everybody going over here. Tive is our whole mission is to help freight arrive on time and in full, and the way
Mm.
we go about helping companies achieve that is raising their overall awareness of their shipments, locations, and conditions in real time. And we do that by utilizing IoT devices and software kind of in tandem. And we also have some monitoring services that we can add on as options. But it's all about equipping companies with the latest and greatest in technology in terms of trackers and software to raise your overall awareness of what's going on. And that makes a big difference, and that's what we want to talk about today is awareness in general, and the importance of raising that across the board.
Man, okay. Visibility on steroids, powering real-time decision making. To Corinne, as you said it a minute ago, I think you said either logistics or freight disruption, because there's plenty of them. Both of them apply. But your thoughts, what you heard there from Richie and what he and the Tive team are up to, Corinne?
Yeah, I think it's really important, because the best laid plans of mice and men are often led astray. So just to borrow a few words there. So contingencies and monitoring where we are at any point in time, just increasingly important, especially with the stat that you shared, Scott, on the increasing issues around getting delivery of your goods.
So it's mind-boggling. And as we were saying before you joined us, Richie, it's got to get more attention. And I tell you, those numbers keep on going directions they're going. It's going to get plenty more attention, right? Really quick before we move on, David, welcome in from Jacksonville, Florida. Great to have you. I wonder what the weather is like down there in Jacksonville, because up here in Atlanta, thankfully, the summer, we're moving closer and closer to the fall. It's not 127 degrees anymore. All right. So now that we know a little bit more about Richie's background, and of course, the cool things that Tyv's up to, I want to set the table a little bit more, because Corinne and I have already kind of pounded the table with sheer data, or as you called it the other day, Corinne, taking the feelings out and bringing in the facts. I think, is that how you put it, Corinne?
Yeah, absolutely. Replacing feelings with facts. You got it.
Okay. So the data shows how big of a problem, a growing problem this is. Now let's put some context, a little more context on it. What are some of the recent examples of cargo theft across supply chain that have really hit your radar, Richie, that you could share with us?
Yeah, and it's interesting the whole data and feelings, comment, Corinne, because there's a lot of people who think that the data doesn't represent the true magnitude of this problem right now because it's based on people reporting. That data comes from
Mhm.
what's reported and how many things are happening that aren't reported. And so there is a feeling that's kind of backed by the statistics that, this problem might be even bigger than what we're aware of. And, some of the things that we're seeing are, you know, interesting. It's so easy to turn stolen goods into cash these days. You have various online marketplaces there, and I think a lot of people are figuring that out. That I can take something that's not mine, and I can have that turn into money quickly. I can put something on, various
Mhm.
marketplaces, and it's sold. Um, so we're seeing lots of creativity around getting freight, and there's organized a lot of organization around those efforts as well. So that might be, a number of double brokering schemes in the beginning. There's a number
Right.
of shell games that can be played to, a truck pulls up and it's not the correct truck, but they found out about the pickup and they're going to try to beat the correct truck to the warehouse to get the freight. There's, marking containers with Apple Air tags or something like that in a port, in order to, find them once they're on the rail. Um, we've heard of stuff like that. There's people, the bad guys are using technology. They're tech savvy. They're finding ways to identify specific truckloads and containers that have the freight that they're targeting, and then they're coming up with various ways to go after that freight. So lots of creativity out there right now, and yeah, I think it's time to respond to that.
Yeah. Richie, Richie and Corinne, why can't we redirect all this brilliant creativity into positive impact of industry? But yeah, hey, that's why criminals exist, I guess. Uh, really quick, before I get Corinne's comments, folks, and we'll keep your company name out of it. If you have any examples,
Mm.
some of your favorite examples or not so favorite examples of cargo theft, we'd love for you to share it in the comments. Corinne, as I look to spin a little pop culture element to this, I think of The Sopranos, which during one season they were stealing containers. They had an organized effort to steal
Yep.
containers of scooters during one of their seasons. And then, of course, more recently, or around the same time, arguably, Breaking Bad, which was a fascinating. Walter White, Jesse, and the whole gang stopped a train to steal a methylene from a tank car, which was fascinating. And folks, we think that cargo theft's not a big thing. It even permeates what we watch on TV, and just those examples and many others. But Corinne, much like cyber, I think, as Richie was speaking about it, not only are the incidents multiplying, but the complexity and the level of orchestration is also getting more complex. What did you hear there?
Yeah, absolutely. And even the simple example, Richie, that you shared about using an Apple AirTag to, identify cargo that thieves are interested in. I'm with you, Scott. If we could just use all that creativity for good instead of evil, imagine where we would be and how supply chains would perform.
Oh,
So it is a very real issue, especially around these high value or highly marketable goods. And it's happening everywhere from food to luxury goods to sporting goods, to take us back to sporting goods, to high value ingredients in the marketplace.
that's right. More strategic, tactical, all points in between. And we're going to dive into defining this risk a lot better here as Corinne and I and the rest of us all here learn from Richie and what they're doing over at TIV. So let's move into our main topic. Now that we've gotten some context out on the table, we've kind of set the table a bit. Our main topic today, unpacking cargo security, defining what puts freight at risk. Risk being a critical topic in so many different ways here in 2024 and beyond. Let's identify some of the key factors that put freight at risk. Richie, tell us more about accidental risk versus intentional risk.
Yeah, it's a good question. And, it kind of makes me, your comment about TV shows, I got to bring up The Wire and season 2 of The Wire. And as old as that show is, they showed some like kind of shell games with how they could hide containers and steal containers. And if it was that complex, and it's, I understand it was a pretty realistic show. If it was that complex, like, I don't know, 20 or 25 years ago, whenever that show was made, like, think what it's like today. But yeah, I think like as far as risk goes, like the kind of accidental risk, if you will, things happen that you can't predict. It could be weather, it could be a traffic accident, it could be a truck breaking down, it could be a driver who gets sick, it could be a reefer unit that breaks unexpectedly. There's all kinds of things. I mean, if you've worked in supply chain, things happen. Stuff hits the fan, like things just go haywire. That's out of anybody's control. So I think those are all risks, and there are things that you can do to lessen those risks across the board. But they're kind of, you don't see them coming. No one sees a car that's going to broadside them on the freeway, if you will. But I think there's also intentional risk at play where people are choosing nefarious behaviors, and it may be something that is kind of not so bad, such as I'm going to turn my reefer unit off for a few hours and save some gas. Well, that does put the freight in the back at risk, because you're playing around with the temperatures, and you may not know the sensitivity of those temperatures, in that scenario. It may be something where a truck driver sees that, oh, I still have half a trailer of room left. I'm going to go pick up a couple pallets or like an LTL load to make a little bit of money on the side. No one's going to know no one's going to know the better. I need to make some more money. I'm deserving, and they justify that behavior. Well, you don't know what you're combining in there. You don't know what's going to happen in the back of that trailer, how it's packed, and there's risk that is being increased with that sort of behavior. And then, of course, I'm going to go steal some freight. That is, of course, a big risk as well. And we're seeing that risk, go up with the recent numbers and the behavior that we're seeing. So I think it's important to just kind of understand risk as a whole stretches a huge gamut. And sometimes it's helpful to kind of bucket things a little bit accordingly.
Love it. I love bucketing. You're talking my language now, Richie. Corinne, before I get a comment from you, a couple things that stood out as Richie was kind of sharing that with us is, first off, risk snowballs. It's like that chapter from the Bible. Risk begats risk begats risk begats risk. It just tends to snowball a lot, right? And then the other thing that came to my mind, and Richie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm following you, between accidental and intentional. So I think about having a desktop computer on, maybe during a lightning storm, and lightning zaps your computer, knocks it offline. It's not, it's more accidental, right? Versus an intentional high-end cybercrime or cyber criminal unit penetrating your computer, stealing your stuff, and telling you, hey, pay us $1 million and you'll get your Amazon order details back. Do I kind of have those two buckets generally described accurately, Richie? Would you follow? Did I pass the quiz?
Exactly. And to build on that, there's things you can do to better your probabilities for each, right? Like maybe not leave your computer on and plugged in during a lightning storm, and then maybe, install some sort of software that's going to keep the bad guys out of your computer. So there's still steps that can be taken to, like we were talking about earlier, like make your probabilities better and more in your favor.
That's right. Playing odds better and embracing countermeasures. Okay, so Corinne, we're about to dive in a little bit deeper into accidental risk and intentional risk, but I think this is just initially these buckets might be living in people's blind spots a bit. Your thoughts there, Corinne?
Yeah, I think it's a great way to consider the risks and disruptions, right? So as supply chain professionals, our goal is, to plan and source and distribute goods, and we're trying to be lean and mean with the inventory we're holding in our network. So a disruption in that actual freight or shipping process is a big disruption for us, because those are typically finished goods or high value goods that we're looking at as raw materials or inbound into our businesses. And we need to control what we can control and take, as you said, or as Richie said, countermeasures to ensure the timely and in good condition delivery of our products.
Yes, well said. Because if that freight doesn't get there on time in full, it really slows down revenue generation, huh?
And in good
Uh,
condition, right? And
that's
in
right.
good condition.
All right, really quick. Well said, Corinne. T squared chain of custody, absolute chain of custody is really important and plays a critical role in all sorts of risk mitigation. Great call out there. We might touch on that later in the conversation. Okay, so Richie, let's dive a little bit deep. Oh, hang on, one more note. We're always here to be resources for our audience, Richie and Corinne. The Wire. Richie challenged me to watch The Wire coming into the show. I'm only about 2.5 episodes in, but folks, you can find that by many folks' account. It's one of the best shows ever created. All the seasons, all the shows are on Max, the Max version, Max channel of HBO. So let us know about that season 2 with container theft. All right, Richie. So accidental risk. Let's dive a little bit deeper in some of those examples and subcategories, I guess, if you will.
Yeah, I think there's, mechanical failures, whether it's an engine, a reefer unit. There's any number of things that can happen with all of the mechanisms that are moving freight. It could be delays that could lead to various delays. There could be weather events. There's a hurricane coming up right now.
Right.
That is going to cause changes to routes and a number of different things. I think that you can go a number of different directions with these kind of accidental risks. Things happen. I think what's important is how quickly can companies find out what's going on? What's the speed to knowledge? What is the speed to awareness? It's one thing to learn about a disruption 5 minutes after it took place versus 8 hours after it took place.
Yep.
And that amount of time can be really meaningful in how far the ripples and the impact of that event are traveling. So yeah, I think in the accidental space or in the intentional space, awareness is huge. But yeah, there's a lot of different buckets or subcategories there for accidental. And yeah, I just touched on a few.
Yeah. Well, and before we add a few more comments, I think another global and economic factors and that subcategory of accidental risk, right? Supply chain disruptions that may be tied to political events or geopolitical conflict and whatnot. Any quick comments there, Richie, before we weigh in on a couple of other items?
We've all learned the impact of a global pandemic on supply chain and what that bullwhip was like, and the initial impact versus the more mid to long-term impacts of that, the swing back and how that impacted economies and so forth. Like, the one thing is that all these things are connected, whether it's geopolitical, whether it's economic, whether it's pandemic and supply chain. There's an interconnectivity across all of these different entities or big, huge hyper objects or whatever you want to call them. So oftentimes when there's, ripples out of one, it's being felt across many. So I think it's important to consider the connectivity of everything globally.
And if you don't get Richie and Tav to help you manage and see better through that complexity, get help somewhere. And I think that was a commercial back in the 80s somewhere. All right, so Corinne, there's a couple great comments I'm referencing in just a second. But Corinne, one of the things I love there that Richie shared is that speed to knowledge. And it reminds me of an anecdote that I like sharing. Ever since I first read it, I'm sure our audience is tired of me saying it, but I think it's so relevant. Joe Vlasic, which was the second generation leader of the big food company, right? In fact, if you ever seen the stork from the pickle commercials, that was fashioned after Joe Vlasic, who ended up being CEO and chairman of the company, really big food conglomerate. And one of his mantras, Richie and Corinne, was kind of what Richie was saying. Give me good news fast, but give me bad news faster. Because I love Richie's call out. When you get bad news in like 5 minutes versus 8 hours, your options are look a little different, as well as the risk. But Corinne, what'd you hear there as we talked about all the different types of accidental risk?
Absolutely. So, the ability to sense and respond, and to do that speed to knowledge. I like thinking of it in that terms. And it's just really important in how you're able to initiate countermeasures, or even in some situations find the freight that has been stolen, when they can look at the location information. It's much easier to find something when it's close to where it should have been at the time than, hours and hours later, when it could be in a number of different locations or directions. So speed to knowledge, or sense and respond, and to do that in the quickest, tightest timeline possible, is a real tangible value.
Corinne, well said. I love that sense and respond, sense, act, and respond, because I think, to me, while we hear about visibility for years now, and some would argue it's become table stakes, the emphasis all too often isn't enough on that acting and responding piece of what visibility gives you. And I think that's a big part of Richie and Tyv's approach. Before we move on, though, let me get these comments in. So T Squared is also a big fan of The Wire, Richie. I guess I'm going to have to give in to peer pressure. He says, Scott's going to get a serious education when I watch that season 2, by the way. Karai Jose is a big fan of Tyv. Karai, great to see you here, as always. I tell you, he's been having some really cool geopolitical conversations. He says, my neighbor, Krinar, I said that right, Richie?
Krinar, yeah.
Company, who I believe that's Tyv's CEO, if I'm not mistaken. He says, my neighbor Krinar's company is doing really cool stuff, helping to drive visibility that isn't just comprehensive, but timely and intelligent. And then he says, I love this optimism. Real life is much better, Scott. That's good. That's good stuff we can all rally around, huh? All right. So intentional risk. Now let's get to that second bucket that we touched on a second ago. Let's give a few more examples, such as, Richie, just straight up freight crime. Tell us more.
Yeah, I think there's the I don't know how to like subdivide these buckets, but you have maybe not so bad or not as bad, still bad, right? I'm going to turn my reefer from continuous to automatic, or to just turn it off. I'm going to save gas money and make a little bit more money on this load, or I'm going to go pick up another load on the way and fill out the back of my trailer. I was on a call with a customer once, and during a call, he got one of our alerts, and he looked down at his phone. He's like, I can't believe it. He's like, Richie, this is all your fault. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, he's like, you're the reason why I have to go have this hard conversation. I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't know what's going on. He's like, well, I just went and bought this driver lunch, and I'm paying him dedicated money to take this half truckload of high value stuff there, and I'm paying him to come back empty. I'm paying him dedicated money. I bought him lunch. I explained to him how important this was. And that was an hour and a half ago, and I just got a light alert. And I know that he's filling up the rest of his trailer. And now I have to make a phone call and have an awkward conversation. And he's like, without that device, he probably gets away with it. I never know.
Right.
So I think there's that sort of thing that can happen a lot, especially with, freight rates being relatively low. There may be more pressure for people to get creative with their diversifying their income streams, so to speak.
Right.
And then you have just straight up theft, right? Like, look at that. There's a truckload of, I don't know, energy drinks is a big target right now, or solar panels or cell phones, whatever it may be. And we have the means, we have this network in place where we can turn that into cash really fast through eBay or Facebook Marketplace or what have you. So we're going to go after that truck. We know where it's going to stop. we have a plan and they have a plan in place, whether it might even be on intermodal. They know where the train's going to stop. They know how to, identify the container. They're going to get in and out quickly, and they're going to find a way to turn it into money really quick. So you have that sort of coordinated effort that's happening as well. So there's kind of the opportunistic sort of things that are taking place, and some of that's rail theft as well. If the train stops and sitting still for 8 hours in a not so great neighborhood, people might get curious about what's inside all of these, and go open them up like Christmas presents or something. So like there's a lot of different things that are coming, in a lot of different risks or a lot of different ways that freight's being impacted, in kind of a nefarious way. So all of those are risk. All of those are making an impact today, and things that people should be aware of.
So, folks, I told y'all we were going to shine a big old flashlight, again, a technical term there, on what's going on with cargo theft. And here in a minute, after we kind of have spent this front end of the conversation on defining the problem, right, defining what's going on, we're going to get some of Richie's advice for steps you can take. And, of course, that'll be a big part of a subsequent conversation we're having in October. But, Corinne, two things from what Richie shared there that I want to call out. On that first example, when the business owner was saying, "Oh, Richie, this is all your fault." But I bet that business leader, as well as all the rest of us out there, would rather have that tough conversation versus experiencing the business loss, right? And then secondly, as Richie was talking about all the different ways that technology enables the good guys, so to speak, right, inclusively, but it's also enhancing the criminal's ability, like that criminal procure to cash cycle has really condensed as well. They steal it and then they offload it quickly for cash, which those cycles condensing really require supply chain leaders' ability to do what you said, that sense and act and respond, or that speed to knowledge, as Richie was talking about. Mm-hmm. It's not a nice to have anymore. But Corinne, what'd you hear? What else did you hear there before we move forward?
Yeah, I think that was two really important takeaways. We work hard in supply chain for predictability, right? And when disruptions occur, whether intentional or unintentional, we want to know about it. We want to know about it quickly. The point about a carrier picking up an additional load, I mean, that puts us in that position of trust but verify, right? We want to secure our goods that are in those shipments around that carrier. But we also need to verify in many situations that they're on track, because of the ability to do something about it. If we need to reroute because of a weather disruption or some other event, it becomes increasingly important. And Scott, I think you said something, visibility. We've all been talking about visibility. The real value comes from when we get that visibility. What do we do? What do we do with it? How do we use it to ensure that we're meeting our business plan and satisfying our customers with goods that are in good condition and timely delivered?
Yes, well said. And if I can make a quick comment there, Richie and Corinne, a few months back, I was saying something along the lines that you just shared there, Corinne. And I think it was misinterpreted as I was downplaying visibility, right? No one's downplaying visibility. There's plenty of companies that are still working hard to gain the visibility. They need small, big, and all points in between. No one is downplaying visibility. But as Corinne was talking about, the emphasis on what you do when you have it, that is the heart of the matter, in my view, at least. So not downplaying visibility. Also, the game has changed so much. And Richie, I am so glad that you're sharing these examples that, again, as we were talking about earlier, don't get shared enough, because the game is not like another little TV show, or this is a movie, The Irishman. You all remember that? That is, I can't remember the famous director that directed Goodfellas, but in front of that movie, one of the central characters drove meat trucks. And of course, they would lock, this is back in the 50s, they'd lock the truck to ensure that all the product gets from stop to stop. Well, the game, too bad it's not that simple these days. The game is so much different than just putting a lock on the back of the trailer, as Richie is indicating. So it is time to upgrade our countermeasures and what we do about it as supply chain leaders, for sure. All right, really quick before we continue, Akena, Hey, welcome in. Let us know where you're tuned in from. Welcome. Let us know what you think as well about the show. T Square is still telling us about what we're going to learn from the wire. That's right. He's in Baltimore. I think that's where the show is based. I didn't make that connection, T Squared. Richard Hastings tuned in from sunny Tucson and Sonoran Desert of Arizona. I'm going to get killed for that. My apologies. But most importantly, glad you're here, Richard and Abraham. Let us know where you're tuned in from. Great to have you. All right. So before we get into some of your suggested actions, Richie, let's talk about any other terms, anything else before we get into suggested steps that supply chain leaders can take. Any other terms, definitions? See, I told you those that you want to share with our audience.
I think you're using this word visibility, and I think it's one of these big buzzwords that everybody's been using this word for years. I think people are kind of fatigued. Like visibility, we got visibility. Let's go get some visibility. I got some visibility. You got some visibility. Like everyone's got some visibility. I can look at it. So I'm kind of drawn to this term awareness a bit more. It's one thing to have some visibility. Yeah, we bought some visibility technology. We checked the box, but like, what are you aware of that's going on with your shipments? And there's lots of different ways to raise that awareness, and there's different ways to think about that awareness. And again, a few more buckets to kind of consider. 4 basic buckets for awareness. Like you have your known knowns. I know that there are cars outside. I can see them. Okay. I know that I know this. I have my known unknowns. I know that I don't know exactly how many cars are in that parking lot. Like I know that I'm not aware of this, so there's a known unknowns. There's the unknown knowns, which is the unconscious one. I have a feeling they're getting rained on, but I don't know for sure. Like it's an unknown known. I'm probably right, but I can't know it. And then you have the unknown unknowns. I don't know what I don't know. Like there's the blind spot. And I think that good technology that is, think about it in the Greg Maddox terminology, the plan that is implemented correctly in a smart and thoughtful way and executed upon correctly is going to raise the overall awareness of all 4 of those buckets. And it's going to shed more light on that 4th bucket too, of what's the unknown unknowns. What do you not know that you don't know? And when that stuff starts coming on board, that can be really powerful. Like that story that I shared about the guy who got the message. That's an unknown unknown. He doesn't know that he doesn't know that that's taken place until he's getting a text message telling him that this activity is going on. Yep. So I think that's what's exciting is, trying to raise the overall level of awareness across the board. That is going to enable all of these supply chain professionals to be better and faster and more in tune with what's going on. Mm-hmm. I think there's also a part of relationships that plays into that's really important too. Having really good relationships is, with all the technology, it's kind of counterintuitive, but that also means that relationships are all the more important today than probably ever before. So that's something else to consider.
Well said. I mean, I wasn't around in 1776 during the American Revolution to check how important relationships were back there, but I tend to agree with you, Richie. Relationships matter, and that's how we're going to leveraging trusted relationships, or how we're going to solve our some of the biggest challenges of our time. Really quick, Corinne, let me get your thought here. But first, Karas says, "Hey, love the TIE mission to pioneer beyond what we thought possible." Sounds like kind of Star Trek-ish. Richie talks and walks like me. First time I hear the unknown unknown not coming from me. Hey, y'all might be second cousins or something. I'll get y'all connected. 2 quick thoughts about, and I'm at the whiteboard this out, Corinne and Richie, so I can follow that philosophical thinking along, Richie. But 2, I think the most dangerous things that you touched on was, number 1, folks and organizations by extension that aren't willing to admit what they don't know. Hugely dangerous. But perhaps what's more dangerous is not willing to investigate what you don't know that you don't know. So, but Corinne, what'd you hear there as he kind of walked us through those 4 different permutations? Am I using that word right?
Yeah, I wrote those down as Richie was going through it. So I think that's valuable to put together as you're looking at your own plans in supply chain, what you do know, what you don't know, and the combinations in between on the performance of just a multitude of variables. And when we're talking about moving goods, there are, in fact, a multitude of variables to be considered. So, Richie, thanks so much for framing it up that way, because I really think that it opens the door for us to consider how do we make performance and delivery more reliable, and how do we build that trust in performance with our important trading partners that are moving goods for us and bringing them to market. And the bottom line is, we haven't discussed this, but this keeps the drivers safe also in
Right.
that, in that conversation. There are win-win propositions all the way around as we monitor the movement of goods.
Corinne, I'm so glad you brought that point up. We're on the precipice of Driver Appreciation Week, which is coming up, I believe, next week or the week after. And driver safety is a big topic that also doesn't get enough attention. And, if we pour the right approaches and countermeasures and proactive leadership action into cargo theft, by extension, it spills over into all other sorts of benefits, including, I would argue, in driver safety. So let's do this, Richie. We got a fast and furious finish. And by the way, behind the scenes, Amanda, Martin Scorsese was the creator of The Irishman on Netflix. So legendary producer in Hollywood, director, whatever, artist in Hollywood, I'll call it. Let's get into some suggested actions. And, we're just going to be probably scraping the tip of the iceberg here. We'll touch on more in a subsequent conversation in October. But what would be a couple of your recommendations for supply chain leaders out there that they can take today, Richie, to protect their freight across the ecosystem?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that should be considered. Relationships, I touched on it previously. Build really good relationships. Take time to understand who you're doing business with, get to know them, vet them, right? And that kind of segues straight into vetting, and all of the vetting. There's different platforms out there that can help with vetting, to try to weed out those bad actors right out of the get-go if you can identify them and get them out of your network. So relationships and vetting, but even then, like, that's not going to catch everything. And as we talked about, things that can happen that are outside of your control with accidental risk. So having a way to track freight and, your freight's location and conditions in real time is becoming, necessary. It's not a nice to have, as you all were discussing previously. I went to a conference not long ago, and there was a whole slide. It was about freight security. And just one slide, all it said was trackers work. And it was just talking about the importance of, if you have any, especially if it's high value, if it's susceptible to temperature, you need real-time awareness of what's going on with those shipments because of the volatility of everything today. So yeah, I think, relationships, vetting who you're doing business with, and tracking your freight. I think these are a great starting point to elevate the overall level of awareness.
What a great start to what folks can do today, Richie. I appreciate you sharing. Corinne, a couple things that stood out to me. Anyone that's ever listened to any of our shows around here, relationships, building meaningful relationship with suppliers, going out and getting into their facilities, meeting the team, understanding what their risks are, right? What's happened, what hasn't happened, what they're doing differently. So critical. And as I'm stating the obvious here, perhaps. And then the other thing, to play on something that Richie touched on that you said earlier, Corinne, is how can we be more effective leveraging technology and a variety of different resources at sensing better, right? Because there's going to be plenty of things outside of our control, right? Going to one of those buckets that Richie was telling us about. But the better we are at sensing and seeing some of the factors and ingredients that make up those perfect storms, the better we'll be prepared to protect whatever resilience we have in our organizations, which we all found out plenty in the last few years. We don't have nearly as much as we thought we did. But what did you hear there in some of those suggestions, Corinne?
Yeah, so the relationships are critical, and I'm a big believer in trust but verify, especially when those relationships are new. I think that Hive offers a way to do that verification. So whether we are monitoring the environmental conditions, the temperature or the humidity or even the shock or jostling that may occur in the actual movement of those goods, that's important, as well as where is that shipment? Is it in the right lane? Is it en route? Will it arrive on time? There's all kinds of good informative things that happen in that verification and monitoring process. But back to Richie's point about, sense where it is or sense what the conditions are, but then respond, start putting your countermeasures in action, so that you can, ensure that your customer is getting the goods and services, the perfect orders that they expect for your brand in the marketplace.
Yeah. Very well said there. And before, we're going to offer up a couple resources to folks in just a minute and make sure folks know how to connect with Richie Daigle as well. But as you were sharing that, Corinne, two other thoughts came to my mind. T Squared said something earlier about chain of custody. Well,
Yes.
to best protect chain of custody, we've got to take a modern day forward looking technology approach. One of many other things we could do. So it's critically important, especially when you think about pharmaceuticals, food, temperature controlled items, you name it, and many others. And then secondly, I know what I was going to say, sustainability. The better we are at mitigating all these risks that Richie and we've been talking about, Corinne, the better there'll be some more spillover effects there on what everyone wants, which is more sustainable, real outcome driven sustainability gains across our global supply chains. And that is also one of the great byproducts of better freight management, risk management, and mitigating the cargo freight, the cargo theft risk that is out there. I need one more. I need that 19th cup of coffee, Richie and
I was going
Corinne.
to say that's almost the tongue twister Richie went through with the known and the unknown.
Yes.
And we didn't know. So I'm going to leave that to the two of you. I'm not
Oh
sure.
my goodness. I'll tell you,
I don't.
Richie.
I was just going to say I don't have those statistics memorized, but the statistics of the amount of freight that goes bad, like food that goes bad in transit, and the percentage of pharmaceuticals that go bad in transit, are really sobering. And so the sustainability, we always talk about solving world hunger and helping people be healthier. There's a huge amount of freight that's going bad that's carrying very important cargo, whether it's food or medicine. So yeah, I think there's definitely opportunity to make a positive change there.
Undoubtedly. I agree with that 1000%, Richie and Corinne. And by saying that, I'm showing y'all my lack of mathematical prowess. All right, a couple quick comments here before I share these resources. Bakil, integrative, integrative relationship is better than distributive relationship. I like that, Bakil. And I like this one too. Don't forget teamwork and communication. What's old is new again, and what's and it's powerful again. Some of the basics. Communication has changed in all the different ways that we can effectively use it. I mean, gosh, think these days. Slack, email, text, you name it, all the different social channels. I mean, goodness, it's tough to keep up with, but whatever is most effective that we can align an organization and a team and our supply chain success around is critical. All right, Richie, you stay on the go when you're not enjoying the beautiful Chattanooga, Tennessee landscape. I was through there about a month or two ago, and the traffic has picked up a little bit as I was trying to work my way through that beautiful scenic view. But I know you also enjoy the backwoods of Tennessee and getting with enjoying your own Walden Pond moments. That's important with family. But when you're not enjoying gorgeous Tennessee, or if you're not out across events, across the supply chain landscape, how can folks track you down for a cup of coffee, talk shop, and figure out how they can do things better in their supply chains? How can folks reach out to you, Richie?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that. And the traffic in Chattanooga is not traffic by Atlanta standards. Like, those are two different definitions, just to clear the record there. But yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. Please feel free to reach out to LinkedIn. I check it probably more often than I should. And then also the Tive website, you can reach out there. And then my email is richie.daigle@tive.com. So feel free to send an email as well.
Awesome. And we're going to be dropping a link or two there. And I will just add, speaking of traffic, Corinne, and all three of us have Atlanta roots in some way, shape, or forms. But my maybe I was setting the wrong expectations. I was expecting to drive through Chattanooga and look at these mountains as I work my way on the other, kind of through the city. Maybe it's because I couldn't do that, and it took me about 25 minutes to get through. Maybe that's why it seemed like awful traffic. But regardless, gorgeous city, and we're gonna make sure folks know how to connect with you, Richie Daigle. Corinne, have you been through Chattanooga lately?
I have, and it was beautiful. And as Richie said, the traffic was nothing compared to the Atlanta area. So
Maybe on a bad.
I didn't have your experience that day, Scott.
All right, hopefully that's the outlier. Then I'll drive up through again. But next time we'll have to get together for an adult beverage and talk shop a bit, Richie. Folks, just like we said, we're dropping the links. Connect with Richie on LinkedIn. Have that conversation. They're doing some cool things over at Tive. We're just scraping the tip of the iceberg here on both this conversation and what Richie and his team are up to. Speaking of which, we're also going to be dropping a great resource in the chat. It's a white paper that Richie and the team put together on cyber scams and high-tech heists, securing freight in the age of strategic cargo theft. Great white paper. I was looking through it earlier before the show. We're dropping a link right there. You're one click away from downloading that white paper, and let us know what you think through all of that. See, Catherine, behind the scenes, helping make things happen, was in Chattanooga over the weekend, where she says she went to Southern Squeeze and Urban Stack. Richie, is that on your recommendation list?
Yeah, she's visiting some of the local establishments. So well done there.
All right, we'll get pictures to prove it next time. But really cool, Catherine. One other thing, Corinne and Richie, because the conversation's not done. Folks, join us, as I've mentioned a couple times through this show, on October 16th as we host Richie again, backed by popular demand, maybe some more baseball stories, along with a friend of the show, David Shillingford, as we're diving into how to effectively confront and overcome the ever-changing dynamics in freight security. Some of what we talked about here and a whole bunch more new stuff. So check out that. We'll be publishing that show really, really soon. Make plans to join us. Okay, Corinne, as we wrap here, we covered a lot of ground. And man, I think we've got a protected truckload of actionable insights, right? And we know where it is. But Corinne, what's one of your key takeaways from our conversation?
Yeah, it's been a great conversation, and the tangible impact that you can make on your business, right? On securing your freight and making sure that it arrives in good condition, in full, to satisfy your customer needs. Truth is, our world is getting smaller. So our nodes, our connection points are getting closer and closer together. And we need the ability to monitor those and monitor not only the condition of our goods, but that our goods are en route and on time for our customers. So I think Richie's given us a few things to think about, and realizing that we don't know what we don't know, or Richie, I'm not going to say this right, the unknown unknown. The unknown unknown. I didn't know what I didn't know. So this is an opportunity to know more about your business and your orders that are being delivered to your customers, and get them there in perfect order and perfect condition.
Love that. What a great sentiment to wrap the show on. I can see Richie pitching on the pitching mound now as he kind of tries to figure out what the batter's expecting, what he knows, what he doesn't know. It's part of the pitcher psychology. We'll touch on that next show. But I thought kind of what Richie and Corinne was saying, I want to revisit what Karai said, the Tive mission to pioneer beyond what we thought possible. And man, the art of the possible has been changing dramatically in recent years. So while the challenges and the complexities and the bad actors are great, together we're greater. And I appreciate what Richie and the Tive team are doing. Richie Daigle, Enterprise Account Executive with Tive. Richie, so great to have you here today.
Thank you, Scott and Corinne. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and look forward to the next one.
I do too. Corinne Bursa, wonderful conversation. 2 in the same week. Really enjoyed your perspective here today.
Thanks for having me. And Richie, thanks for the education.
I feel like, I feel like I'm leaving with a new PhD in cargo theft here
I
today.
know.
You two are too
Um,
kind.
so, folks, but that's not good enough. Just being more informed and being more educated isn't good enough. It doesn't cut it. We got to take one thing that Richie shared here today and put it into action, right? Our teams, our organizations, our suppliers, our customers, not only are they expected, they're waiting for business to be done better and easier with less friction and certainly less theft. So take one thing that Richie shared, put it in action, deeds, not words here today. And on that note, on behalf of the entire team here at Supply Chain Now, hey, be sure to connect Richie. Check out that white paper. Join us on October 16th. Connect with Corinne across social as well. But whatever you do, hey, do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. And we'll see you next time right back here at Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.